Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast, where we talk to customers and experts about how to create products and services that feel like time well spent. And now, here are your hosts, experienced nerds, strategists, Dave Norton and Aranza Savas.
Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast. I'm Aranza Savas.
And I'm Dave Norton.
And today we are joined by Zibby Owens, an author, podcaster, publisher, CEO, and mother of four. And Zibby and I actually met years ago when we were both working at Weight Watchers. And since then, we've both gone on to do lots of different things. But Zibby has been especially busy. She's founded Zibby Owens Media, which is a privately held media company that I really just love the mission of. They say they're designed to help busy people live their best lives by connecting to books and each other. I can think of few worthier causes. She's also the host of the wildly popular Moms Don't Have Time To series. Her Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books podcast has been downloaded millions of times and is really upending, I think, the way people connect to one another and to books in its own right, but certainly just a powerful extension of everything that you're doing. Your recent memoir, Bookends, I love the subtitle, A Memoir of Love, Loss, and Literature, and your first children's book, Princess Charming, were recently released, and I know you have a novel coming and another children's book coming. You're a busy woman. And so as a part of our mode series, and for those of you who've been listening along, remember that a mode is a mindset and a set of behaviors that people get into. And I think Zibby is a remarkable example of somebody who is mode shifting and probably spending chunks of every day in many modes. And so today we've asked Zibby here to help us understand what it's like to be a multi-hyphenate, jetting from mode to mode, sometimes probably without a whole lot of opportunity to seamlessly or elegantly transition between them, and the tools and behaviors and mindsets that help her thrive. So, Zibby, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your incredible national media tour here to hang out with us. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. That was quite an introduction, so thank you.
You were on quite a wild ride. It's been really fun to watch. And I know the book is new, so there's probably lots of folks who haven't had a chance to read it yet. I will say I loved it. It was so much fun to read, of course, about your wildly fascinating life, but I also just loved reading about your process and your mindsets that you employed to manage through a lot of really challenging moments and turn them into love and opportunity. So really excited to talk about all of that. I'm a bit of a process nerd, so it was exciting to me. And I know Dave really enjoyed it as well.
Absolutely.
But since lots of folks haven't gotten to read it yet, can you give us sort of the Zibby in a nutshell? It's such an impossible question. I'm sorry.
Okay. I know this whole journey, it's so funny because people are like, oh, I read it in a night or I read it in 2 days. And I'm like, I had to live my entire life for you to read this in like a night and a half. So
it's like cooking, right? You cook and clean and chop.
I know,
and it's
so
gone.
Funny. But basically, it's a snapshot of different moments in my life, and they all combine these unexpected plot twists that have happened from the loss of my best friend on 9/11 to even going back further, my parents' divorce, how I started writing for 17 magazine, what it was like being a stay-at-home mom, surviving business school, many more losses, motherhood, falling in love again at 40, divorce, eating issues, friendship issues, and then books all the time. So I included the books I was reading through each moment in my life because that's how I remember books. I'm like, oh, right, I was on that plane reading that book. And books for me have been so life-saving through so many moments of happiness, unhappiness. Books have always been there for me. And part of my wanting to give back to authors is because I consider them such rock stars. And So I included a lot of different books in my book, and now I'm having like a book fair for all the authors. I don't know. I'm like deep in the bookish space.
Well, it's so interesting that you start there. And I hadn't even thought about this until you just said it. But a lot of what we want to talk about is how you transition from mode to mode. And it sounds like books really
Help
are a
with
part
that.
of that. Yeah.
Books help so much. They certainly are my biggest mood shifter. Like I don't do anything else these days, honestly. Like I used to at least work out a lot, but these days I swim a few laps. This morning I was swimming laps and I was like, I literally feel like I'm 90 years old. Like I'm one of these, like, this is like what it's come down to. It's like for this is all I got. But I don't do yoga, breathing exercises, meditation, blah, 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 blah. I don't. So my only calm really is reading. That's the only time that everything else gets shut out and I focus just on that. That is my reset. It changes my mood. It inspires me, makes me laugh, cry. I love it. It's like my feeling shifter, right? I just follow like I'm holding on to the edge of a fishing line and the books are just like taking me through wherever they go. So yes, it does help me shift modes. But I have to say up front, I've realized about myself that I really need all that shifting. Like that is how I operate at my most efficient, is when I have a lot of different inputs and I can go from project to project to project. If I focus on one thing too long, my energy wanes. But when I keep switching, my energy just keeps revving up. So I love having 4 kids, because once I get too frustrated with one kid, I can just go over to the other kid's room. And, so I view that, I've come to terms with that. I never really realized it so much as I have during the last year or two, when I'm like, oh, okay, so this is why I've always been involved with like 5 boards and this and like, this class and this class. I've always been a little bit like that. It just wasn't always for professional gain, right? It was when I was staying home with my kids for 11 years. So, but I like switching modes and it energizes me.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And it sounds as though the books help with the sustainability. And it sounds as though those are sort of restoring your energy in between them, right? Because you're consuming in that space. It is still active, certainly, but you aren't the creator of the energy. Whereas in so many of these other modes, you are responsible for creating the energy there. You get to step back a little bit. And so it's interesting to me that you have these very complementary tools that you rely on. One is the energy building and one is the energy giving.
Writing too. I think also writing helps reset. I know it's still, internal and coming out, but it's another way I can take feeling overwhelmed or emotional or something. And once it comes out on paper, for me, I feel much better. Even if it's something as, I posted this week about this experience I had with this puppy. Anyway, I don't want to go into it, but I could write the whole thing out and immediately like make sense of it. Yeah. Sometimes until I write things down, they're not clear. I'm not clear 100% how I feel until it's been distilled on paper. And then it becomes very clear. So
I will say that particular instance, I of course read this story that you're talking about. And I think of it as a story of you learning from your experience. And I think so many of us bear down on our decisions. And it's really easy to feel like, okay, I've made the decision. I got to just keep going down the road. Hold steady, because I think that's a big value in our society. And what I loved about your post and I loved about your mindset as you processed through that was it sounded to me like you were going down a journey of, it sort of started with, I can't change modes. I've made a commitment. And as you continued, you were like, and that commitment isn't right for right now. And so I'm going to publicly acknowledge that we get to change our minds. And I just think that's so rare and important that we acknowledge that.
Yeah. And maybe just for clarification, I rescued a puppy moments before I went on national TV on Good Morning America, the morning of my pub day for Bookends, which I've worked on and off for 18 years about. And I was on such a high, so excited. I found this adorable puppy, looked just like my dog, cuddled her to my chest. And they're like, she can be adopted. I was like, oh my gosh, I'll take her, and then before I could even think it through on TV, when I went on my segment, they started it with, and Zibby just adopted a puppy. And I was like, okay, I'm adopting a puppy. And I was like, it's not how I was planning on telling my kids about this or anybody else, but that's okay. And so I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I have a very full life. I made a decision with my heart instead of my head. Honestly, I was just like, and we'll see. I mean, I have the puppy I've now sent to a board and train to work with a trainer for a couple months, and we'll see. But for now, I have 4 kids. It's like, it's already insanity in my house. Like the idea that I took like a wild animal, essentially like this adorable 7-week-old rescue puppy, and like put it into an already precarious environment, right? Where everything finally was just holding still, was like the whole house of cards just collapsed. And,
and I think
but yeah,
too,
so I wrote about it.
And I loved that you did. And I do think that even beyond this specific story, so much of our context plays into our decisions, and is in the context of the GMA studios, it made perfect sense. But in the context of your real life, it was a lot.
Yeah. And I do really want all the best for this puppy. I fell in love with this puppy. Our whole family did. And I'm keeping very close tabs on the puppy. I'm checking in all the time. Like, I'm still responsible for the puppy. I'm not giving it back. But yeah, I did just have to say, and I felt like I needed to say it publicly because everybody's like, how's the puppy? And I'm like, oh my God. So, we can only handle so much. I'm only human, and I make mistakes, and sometimes I act too impulsively, and I'm only human. So I feel terrible
for that. We all are, and that's honestly, again, what's so remarkable, both about the book, but about that particular story, is it was a moment of vulnerability and truth, and acknowledging that we're all human. And there were a few things that struck me as being very sort of unique in your perspective as I read the book. And one of them was your capacity for intimacy and sort of the degree of connection you experienced with each individual person in your life. I think is actually pretty unique and remarkable. And so it just didn't come as any surprise to me that in a moment you found this connection and developed a quick sense of intimacy. And so that it is like, I was struck by a sense too of superpowers in your book. And I know a lot of people have asked you about your process, how you get it all done. And you use the word super a lot in the book. I don't know if anybody's talked about this with you, but you talk about super smart a few times, and you talk about super speed a few times. And there is this sense of just like an elevated capacity to keep going through challenges. And I do think that your vulnerability and your ability to sort of say, okay, I'm a human being and things are hard, and I'm going to let off the gas for a second and recover and then come back, are a part of how you maintain that super speed and that super smart super power set that you have. So what do you believe helps you keep going and growing despite the many extraordinary challenges that you have lived through?
I don't know that I even have an answer for that. I don't know. I just, what choice is there? I have to keep going. I have a family. I have responsibilities. It's not to say that I don't wallow at times, right? If I'm really upset about something, it doesn't mean that you won't find me crying on the bathroom floor. But then how long can I sit there? The floor is cold. I have to stand up again. So I guess one of my answers is my kids and being a good mom and not having the luxury of totally falling apart all the time. I mean, I guess theoretically I could, but I won't. A lot of the losses I write about in the book happened before I had kids, and I don't know. It's funny. Gretchen Rubin has these 4 tendencies that she outlines in her book, and I'm an obliger. Like, I'm very eager to please all the time. So if you give me a deadline, I am not missing that deadline. If I have to be somewhere, I am there. If I have to finish, this, that, or the other thing, I'll do it. So I think I will get, if there's a snowstorm, I'm putting on the boots and I'm going to the event. That's just like the kind of person I am, because especially not an event for me. Like, I will skip a workout class, right? I'm like, or but if it involves somebody else really, and I have to show up for someone, I'm doing it. And I do feel that it's just my natural instinct to keep going. And I really do feel like, what choice do I have? And, I get a lot of, I stay busy. My staying busy gets me through the hardest times. So sometimes the harder and emotional time I'm having, the more I double down on my busyness. So when my husband's mom and grandma passed away 2 years ago during COVID, I launched more and more things. And people are like, how are you doing these things at once? But that's exactly why I'm doing these things at once. That's how and the busy things all help me. When I connect with other people, like, I do 7 podcasts a week at least. It's amazing for me. Like, it's not work. I can't think of anything I want to do more than like read a book and talk to the author about it. Oh, I have to do that over and over again. Like, okay, twist my arm. I love doing that. So, the emails are the things. The email, if there was a line for that email, that would sound really nice. But the emails take up the most of my time. But the work that I do, I adore. I absolutely adore.
Yeah, to me, the biggest theme that's coming back in everything that you're sharing is the power of knowing what works for you. Whether it's being busy or books or accountability to others, and then designing your whole life to be aligned with what works. It doesn't mean you're going to stop learning new things that work through the process. But once you know a few things and you've done the work to really know what helps you, and then everything else sort of gets architected to align with those. So the podcast, it seems, and certainly I know some of the spin-off podcasts in particular were really designed to say like, hey, I need some support and some accountability on this, or I need some connection on this. And so then you just created spaces and places where you were with your people and you could say, hey, hold me accountable to showing up. I mean, I think even saying I'm going to do a daily podcast, that's a big, bold move. And you said it and you know you're an obliger. So now that you've said it, you're going to show up.
I tried to get it down to 5 a week and I don't want to. I guess I just don't want to. If I really wanted to, I would. So, yeah.
But again, that's you knowing what you want and being honest with yourself and your community, which is vast now. It maybe started a lot smaller, right? It was this little friend group.
Let me back up and just say, I am not recommending this to anyone. I am not recommending the way that I operate. This is not, if I could pick all the ways and modes of the world, this is not one I would necessarily choose. It just so happens this is the way I'm wired. Because I often feel like I'm circling really close to the rotating fan. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm right up there. and I have to be so careful, or it's all, like it's close. It's a little too close. So sometimes one extra thing can set me over the edge, even if it's a little thing. So I'm
and the fan keeps getting higher, which means you keep getting higher and closer to it. So for this next chapter, and it feels like literally you've published this book and now all these other books are coming. It does feel like if we were still in Bookends, this would be a whole new section of the book. We would be, right? We're not really
I'll have to write
this
later. Yeah.
This is the next memoir, number 2. So what do you need at this point, do you believe, to keep you off the fan, but rising with it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, yes, this next chapter, if this was the next chapter of my memoir, the book stuff is amazing. But honestly, a lot of my time right now is being spent on my publishing business and running that whole business and thinking that through in Zooms and calls and stuff like that. So, what I need a lot of is having the right people around me, personally and professionally, and making sure I'm surrounded by people I trust and who I can delegate to, or not even delegate, just people who I'm doing this all with, who get what I'm doing and can do it like I can. So I think surrounding myself with the right people is key to being able to maintain this whole operation. Because when something falls, even if it's like my babysitter leaving, or just when one piece falls out of place, I can't do it. So I think that's important. I think I don't know. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I get a lot of energy and excitement from this external praise. Like, it really helps. I obviously need it.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, no, I analyze myself all the time. I'm like, I'm like my own patient, but I'm like, okay, clearly I need to post about this, and tell the world, like, why do I feel like I need to do this? But for whatever reason, I need that. And so getting that though is also just incredibly wonderful. So, I'm going to keep posting. I think being part of the community on Instagram, I know this sounds silly, but it's really important to me in my day-to-day stuff. And then, if everything else could just not keep changing, that would really help me out.
Wouldn't that be great? And yet I don't think you'd be very satisfied if it did. You are a people person in every sense. And so it doesn't surprise me in the least, again, that the Instagram community gives you a sense of energy and connection. It doesn't sound silly at all. And, as we think about what this means for experienced strategists, I keep coming back to this idea that it's really about helping people find what helps them. And then ensuring that we, as experienced creators and strategists, deliver on those needs specifically instead of sort of generalized needs or expectations for what people want or what helps them. Not everybody knows that. So I do think the first step is the work that you've done of really looking at yourself and saying, hey, when do I feel great? When do I feel energized? When do I feel productive and on purpose? And when do I feel depleted? And how do I find that balance? So I told you the next step in this little dialogue here is that we're going to let you go back off into your busy life and probably go do 100 more things before the day is over. And we're going to talk directly to the experienced strategist who listen to our show about ways maybe that they can use your experience to learn from it and really help their customers who may be slightly different multi-hyphenates, may have different things between the hyphens, but so many of us are so busy and are switching from one mode to the next so often that we think there's probably some great opportunities to provide some support there. For those of you listening, before we let Zibby go, I want to make sure I tell you where to find more of her. You can find her on Instagram and become a part of that beautiful community of encouragement and vulnerable, open dialogue that she is promoting through her own honesty. And you can also find more about her publishing life and her company and more at zibbyowens.com. So you are Zibby Owens in all the places. And I will be there reading and watching and liking and following and learning from you. So thank you for being here and letting us learn.
Thank you so much.
Today.
Thank you. Thank you for the close read of the book and for all of the psychotherapy.
It's what we do. I like people too. I loved talking to Zibby and hearing how she thinks about what she does and how she does it. And I've already sort of shared some of the key takeaways I've had as an experienced strategist, but I'm super curious. You were kind of in the background there today, listening in and taking notes, I know. What jumped out at you, Dave?
Wow. So Zibby is at once very relatable. I think every mom can understand what it's like to kind of find yourself multitasking, working between work and home and children and trying to keep things going. And at the same time, she is a high performer. She's if you read the book, she's been through all kinds of ups and downs. And I thought it was really interesting that she started out seeing herself as a very shy person and then kind of worked her way out of that, which was a really fascinating part to me in this entire process that she's gone through. When you're dealing with modes and you've got a customer who is like Zibby, a high performer who has multiple hats that she's wearing and constantly switching between different hats, it's really important for companies to not just focus on the way to keep them performing at a high level, but also to allow for them to be able to relax, to be able to step away from that. When we're helping companies to understand different modes that their customers get into, we recommend that they not just focus on kind of that peak performance part, but that they focus also on the relaxation part. And for her, it's reading books. Reading books is a way of transitioning into that next high level of performance, which is so important. The other thing that
she turns it off, she said. She turns it off, which I thought was so cool. And I have signed up recently to test a personal training app. And I'm training with someone who is an elite athlete. And I'm being given these really intensive training sessions. And I think for me, one of the most valuable things is that she, the trainer, it emphasizes turning off as much as turning on. And I just think it creates a permission to keep going. And so I think that's one really nice example we can see for how that can work, because we all struggle with customer engagement over time and keeping our customers engaged and energized. And I just think you hit the nail on the head here in terms of the biggest takeaway, which is that if we ask people to just keep going at 1,000,000 miles an hour all the time, they're going to get burned out. They're going to stop, and they're going to naturally be too depleted to carry on. And so how do we think about a journey as one that isn't just accidentally ebbing and flowing, but is intentionally normalized to ebb and flow?
Yeah, and that is a really important part of what customers are looking for today. You might be thinking, that somebody is having a bad experience because they seem to be not zoning in. They might be zoned out. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're having a bad experience. It may mean that they're in recovery mode, and that's okay to be in recovery mode. And then when they're ready to be in high performance, you allow for that. You support that as well. So it can go both ways. The other thing that's interesting is she's developed the ability, she's very aware of her modes. She might not use the term modes, and that's okay. It's okay not to use the term modes all the time, but she's very aware. She's got an understanding of what works for her, which is fantastic. And that's part of the reason why the fan keeps getting higher and she's able to stay below the fan, is because she knows where she's at. So a lot of customers don't really know the modes they're getting into. They're just responding to external stimuli and frustrations. And if you're part of that external stimulus, you're creating a situation where they're not really aware of what's working for them and what's not working for them. It's fascinating to me that we could start a conversation with Zibby and use the term modes, and she immediately embraced it.
Yeah.
It's not a part of her vernacular per se. It wasn't a hard thing for her to jump into. By making customers aware that they get into different modes, you're actually helping them to elevate their performance. And
yes, absolutely.
Any type of organization can do that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's acknowledging, hey, what mode are you in? And we see this in iPhone right now in a really visual way. I think Google is doing it really well. Lots of the big tech companies are telegraphing this idea to you in really strong ways because they understand this. Yeah. The other thing I think that you're pointing out too is moments of reflection and getting people to reflect on, so what mode are you in right now is actually its own tool. Even beyond knowing that you have multiple modes is taking a moment to ask yourself what mode you are in. So there's lots of things happening there in that awareness that can deepen the value of an experience, both in terms of its ability to understand and respond, but also to feel known and understood by the product.
Yeah, when we first started studying modes for our clients, the number one request that we got from clients was, help me to anticipate the mode that the customer is going to be in next, or a different variation on that. Help me to get the customer into a mode that I want them to be in. And the customers pushed back. They were not interested in that. That was too invasive for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But when we switched it to help me be more aware of the modes that I'm getting into, surprisingly, that relationship reestablishes with the company, with the brand, and you're able to kind of stop worrying about, am I going to support them in this moment, in this particular setting, in this particular situation? You don't have to worry about that. They're going to come around to the mode that is the mode that you want them to be in. And when they're ready to be in it, you're ready to support them. It's a very different way of thinking about what you're trying to do.
And it doesn't take any more work.
Right.
It's just coming at it it actually, I think, takes less work. Yeah. It's like the difference between going to your customer or trying to drag them to you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The other thing I thought was interesting, you brought up this idea of superpowers. Why did you do that? Why did you bring up superpowers?
Well, that word is so prevalent in her book and her identity. And she is someone, I think, who people probably perceive as having a bit of superhuman strength. But I honestly believe it's really just that she understands what her strengths are. And that if we could help customers understand their strengths and rely on them, they could feel a lot stronger and a lot more superpowered. And so I do think it's an opportunity for companies to connect their customers, especially when they're doing aspirational jobs and transformative jobs, to connect their customers to the superpowers that they invariably possess. We all have them. We all have skills and gifts and talents. And so if we can get our customers to identify what those are and then help them see that as a part of the journey, they're going to feel more empowered. They're going to feel more supported. They're going to feel more, again, known and understood.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be more successful.
I'm going to think, I just, this really odd thought just ran through my mind. I'm just going to go with it here for a second.
I love your odd thoughts. Bring it on.
I wonder what would happen if a bank decided that instead of showing you a summary of your transactions, they said something like, your superpower is your ability to keep your costs down. How validating that would be for someone. And who knows, maybe some people would be like, how do you know that's my superpower? But I think a lot a lot would be very receptive to it.
Well, and I think they can validate that through analytics, right? To say, compared to 98% of customers, you have a superpower in this area.
Absolutely. And when you have superpowers and you are aware of the modes that you get into, and all of a sudden your superpowers are starting to make your modes better. So you're even more relaxed when you're reading a book, and you're even more capable when you're running a podcast. That's an amazing dynamic. And if companies could find a way to actually support that dynamic, see, that's where relationships really happen over the long term. I really do think that Instagram has a friend.
Comes from.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But Zibby,
because it doesn't feel like a
she's
conflict orientation.
Yeah,
it feels like, oh, you get me, you care about me, you see me. That's all any human wants.
And Zibby talked about Instagram. Her relationship with Instagram is positive. It's not negative. It's not and the reason is because
people said mean things to her and hurt her feelings on there.
Sure. But she understands how to use the tool to strengthen herself rather than letting the tool dominate. And consequently, I don't think Instagram's going to lose her as a customer, right? So Instagram has a vested interest. Facebook has a vested interest in helping you to develop your superpowers, understand the modes that you get into, because it changes the way you use their tools, their solutions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true for really any subscription-based product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They have a vested interest in knowing you and helping you feel. Yeah. Because people don't want to give away their power either.
No.
They want to feel empowered. And I think knowing their superpowers allows you to empower them.
Sure. I'm glad you brought that up, because we have a tendency in corporate America to say we want to give them control, by which we mean they can kind of self-serve when they're interacting. And what we're describing is something so much more empowering. We want the tools to actually make you feel like you're able to work at your highest level or relax at your lowest point as well, or cope with a crisis or overcome shyness or something along that line. So there's way more to this idea of empowerment than I think a lot of companies really think about for their products.
I agree. I am super excited to continue this mode series. We have lots more high performers and really interesting folks for you. So for those of you listening, please stay with us on the journey, share it with your friends, and tell us what you want to hear more of. And we'll try to connect with those folks and get their stories so that we can all keep learning together how to create more impactful customer experiences. Thank you for listening, Dave. Thank you for being my partner in crime in all of this. And we'll see more of you next week. Oh, and if you're listening to this and you're not watching it, know that now you can watch it. You know, some of us are visual people. And so this is our first ever video episode. And you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel. And you can link to all of that from our website, experiencestrategypodcast.com.
Thank you for listening to the Experience Strategy Podcast. If you're having fun nerding out with us, please follow and share wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Find more episodes and continue the conversation with us at experiencestrategypodcast.com.